off you go.
So we thought it would be good to chat some tactics now that we've all had a few weeks to get used to virtual training and sort of assess some of the differences between like this and like one-on-one PT, which we're all very used to. We've had some good chats amongst ourselves and with some other coaches that we know. And given that this could potentially be something that lasts like quite a while into the future, with some of our different clients having different setups going forward with their like working environment, it might be useful to keep sharing tips and sort of build on our knowledge so that we can keep delivering like a really good product. Is that something that sort of rings true with people? Do we know when our clients are going to be returning to the gym, or is it going to be something that we're going to like? I feel that we're going to be doing like a hybrid model of one-on-one when we get to return, and then some virtual, maybe some outside. I know Rachel said you were doing a little bit of everything at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's likely going to be the future. So it'll maybe be good to discuss a few ideas of how we have tried to do some things at SIX3NINE, and some of the things that we've found have been helpful. So has everyone got audio coming through okay and can see the screen? It's not super essential if you can't see the screen. It's just more speaker notes for me, but it'll be good if people can see it as well. So we're going to go through a little bit on programming within sessions and looking at some of the differences between one-on-one PT and like virtual training, which seems to be the sort of common name for sort of video conferencing training. And then there's some other things that we've all been working on with clients. We've titled sort of other ways to win, which will be a bit of an analysis of things that are sort of unique to lockdown that make it a little bit easier to achieve some goals over others. And then I've included a little case study at the end of a client that I've been working with, and how he's been impacted by some of the changes that we've made based on lockdown. This slide is a little bit chaotic, but it's more just to form a discussion point for programming. So we found that virtual training, as Kerry was just mentioning, is maybe not ideal. And obviously we're all well practiced at coaching one-on-one PT and doing sessions in the gym. So it's not been my favorite thing. Like virtual training is not something that I've been particularly enjoying, just because I don't feel as competent at it. And some of the other disadvantages to it are listed on the screen. We've got like access to far less equipment than we would do in regular gyms and our normal places of work. We don't have the ability to sort of travel around a client from like a 360 point of view. So I know in our gym, we're big fans of like sort of multiple points of observation. When we're watching a client do something, we have mirrors, we have the ability to move around them to really get a good sense of how they're moving. And that's massively hampered by the fact that we're looking on like a small iPhone screen, or only having that single plane view of them. Audio quality is sometimes pretty crap. Like I've got some clients who are training from different countries, and there's like a significant delay. So there's some communication issues that are a little bit harder to get around. And the last point I've mentioned is value. I feel like virtual training can have immense value to clients, but PTs that I've spoken to are feeling under like a lot of pressure, because if you take, for instance, a client in a regular like PT studio in town, a lot of what they're paying for is having a convenient gym location, having very nice equipment, having good sort of consumables, toiletries, fluffy towels, and the cost of the PT is wrapped up inside of that. Whereas now all of the value is coming from us as a trainer, because all of those other things are just stuff in their living room. They've got their regular showers, their regular towels, the equipment that they might have been able to find off of Amazon. So for us to sort of justify that, the price, all of the value has to come from us, which can put a little bit more pressure on it. And it highlights the fact that some of the other things I've mentioned aren't good either. But that's kind of what we're stuck with. So it's going to be more of a discussion of what we're going to do about that rather than lamenting it all that much. Has anyone else found anything that they've found to be like a further disadvantage of virtual training? I know, Russ, we've talked about this quite a bit.
Go on, Monty.
No, I was just going to say sometimes it can be difficult with the internet signal. I know that my signal hasn't been consistent, and I think that can sometimes affect the kind of fluidity of the session, because it can sometimes interrupt it. Some clients are on a timetable, and it can just be quite disruptive if your internet drops out one day or whatever reason. The call quality isn't very good. I think it can be quite frustrating for the trainer and the client.
Yeah, that's something that it's just a completely new problem.
Yeah, I found that as well. Particularly, I think it was about 2 weeks ago when Zoom did the update, and I let everyone know, but I found it on different devices. So like if they were going from an iPad to a laptop, or I was doing that, then sometimes it just wasn't showing the picture, and there was all sorts of things going kind of unusually with it. So that was eating into like 10-15 minutes of some of the beginning of sessions by the time some people had worked it out. So what I then did with that is started using like FaceTime, WhatsApp video, Teams, and had other options as well as Zoom, because that was really different when they did that update.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice, like having several platforms, but even a couple of different devices that you know that you can access different points on if there's some sort of glitch in one. It almost feels weird because I've had clients that have had Wi-Fi issues, and I'm the one sort of going, "Oh, have you tried that?" I'm the sort of trying to apologize for it because it's me that's unable to deliver the product, even though it's their problem.
I had when Zoom did the update where you had to allow someone in. One of my clients was like, "Yeah, like, are you having trouble?" They're like, "Oh, I'm in the waiting room." I was like, "What?" Like, I had no idea what this waiting room was when that was a new thing. I was like, "Okay," just like trying to find where the hell the waiting room was to let them in.
Yeah, one of my clients joined in on a session that I was already coaching because they were. I'd just given them all like a meeting link beforehand. Sort of set up my diary thinking I was being really efficient, and they'd sort of just logged in while they were getting ready, like half an hour before their session started. And I was like, "Oh, what's this?" I'll just click on it, and I was like, "Oh no!" Just had to cancel them. I was like, "No, cancel them, end the meeting for everybody," and then had to like log back in. That's pretty embarrassing. But yeah, we're all learning how to use this new tech, and some people, myself, will probably be a big culprit of this, is pretty like tech, not phobic. I just don't really use it all that much. Russ will argue with me that I'm a full-on phobe, but yeah, there's obviously some quirks that will present themselves, and having some different strategies in place. Areas of the house that are better for Wi-Fi, making sure, like I bought a big like Wi-Fi booster thing, and that seems to have helped the sort of consistency of the signal. So things like that are handy. With that in mind, the sort of less equipment, our coaching ability, sort of audio and tech issues. I think it's interesting the sort of how we've discussed how it shapes our programming. We did some workshops early on in the lockdown on how we could try and make sure that our clients are still getting a very good service. And some of the general things that we found was that it was obviously the lack of equipment makes it much harder to program for things like strength training, compound lifts. Like most people haven't got access to barbells or any real sort of heavy load, which makes strength training very difficult, hypertrophy training moderately difficult, not as hard. So rather than trying to sort of force ways of trying to continue with that training, we've found that it's been nicer to sort of perhaps bias the programming towards some different disciplines that will allow our clients to still make progress, because there's increased difficulty with like a novel stimulus. So I know a lot of our trainers have been working with clients on like bodyweight skills, like a lot of push-ups, a lot of split squats, lunges, things like that. And also like mobility and like cardiovascular disciplines. Just because there's still lots of ways of making progress with those moves in absence of heavy weights. I think a lot of us particularly have been more exploratory with CV training, adding in like circuit styles, supersets, and maybe some higher intensity based work, because we don't have the load that's going to create that intensity. So it's had to come from increasing the output in a session. Sorry, Kerry, were you going to say something? I thought maybe it was just my screen stuttering. Has everyone found that to be similarly true though? Faye, I know you're a big cardio fan anyway, but have you found that pushing some clients towards that?
Yeah, absolutely. Before it went a bit too mad out in Paris anyway, a couple of my clients jumped on the turbo bandwagon and got some indoor cycling going, and then a couple of them managed to get some really cheap treadmills, which I definitely don't recommend because they've all broken. But they were good for 2 weeks. So yeah, definitely a bit more cardio based stuff and a bit more yoga as well. I managed to persuade them to do a bit more yoga mobility type stuff rather than just pounding the circuit stuff all the time.
Nice. But yeah, so yeah, like things like yoga or mobility, like movement work, is really nice to work on. Like some of the things, like we've had a bit of a conflict with some of the things, is that there's some exercises that increase intensity because they increase the skill element, but then they become a little bit harder to coach. So there's obviously, with each client, it's kind of weighing up what's appropriate to each client. But yeah, the point about like reducibility and with like audio and Wi-Fi is that complex moves without that 360 input become a bit harder to coach. So we want to be trying to stick with moves that our clients are pretty familiar with. But then it becomes harder if we're trying to introduce a novel stimulus, because we haven't coached them that move in before, and then we're faced with all these difficulties. So if it is a more complicated move, I know we've discussed before, like the idea of sending a video over or of a more detailed description of how to perform that move in advance, so they've got a little bit of a chance to get used to it. And then when you're trying to coach them, maybe looking at multiple angles, like one from the front, one from the side. I've got my mat sort of set up so that it's 45 degrees on. I found that angle is quite good for them being able to see what the front and side of the body. And I like to get that angle back from clients as well. Russ?
Yeah, I think it was actually something you said to me in the first week of lockdown about having a contrasting yoga mat to your gym kit. And I've definitely found that one side of my yoga mat is dark green, the other one's very, very light green, almost like neon. And it's, if I'm wearing black sort of joggers or shorts, joggers are probably worse. On the dark side, it's very difficult sometimes with lighting to actually see what I'm doing. If I'm getting, like where my legs are and stuff, but if it's the lighter side, much easier. So I've always flipped it over now for
yeah. Yeah, even things like that, just make it, I've been wearing like bright socks so that I've always got a
I'm wearing, because I don't really wear red, but if I'm wearing black or grey or whatever, then they can always see the red like dumbbell in my hand or the resistance band or kettlebell.
Yeah, definitely. I think it makes such a difference. Such a good idea.
Is my audio still coming through?
It's back. Yeah, you're back now.
Oh, sorry.
Rachel covered for you.
Thanks, Rachel. So with some of those complex moves, yeah, having some strategies in place to make sure that we're still able to coach them well, like sending over a bit more detail. But I know that with the sort of cardiovascular element and perhaps making use of more intensity through simpler exercises, I know that a lot of us have been using like circuit training or supersets. I found these particularly useful because they kind of cater for all of the disadvantages. So we can sort of up the intensity by using exercises back to back, and also you can kind of coach them through one circuit, and then you can kind of get to observing rather than having to go back and forth between demonstrating and then them going. It might be that I'll choose one slightly more complicated exercise like a curtsy lunge or something like that, and then a couple of exercises where one might be a core or one might be like a static hold, and then something that's slightly higher intensity where the technique isn't so important, so that you're only really coaching one exercise every few minutes rather than constantly sort of back and forth between sort of them and you having to be on camera. And then sort of programming over a number of weeks so that they gradually get used to those exercises as well, so that I'm not always having to coach them something new each time. So this allows for like a lot of our clients in the gym don't really do that type of training. It's more like, okay, well, here's a piece of equipment that we're going to be using for the next 10 minutes, and we'll do like 4 or 5 sets, including a couple of warm-up sets or something. So having that novel stimulus from the different training method has allowed for like increased intensity, even though the load isn't as high. We kind of talked about like equating effort, which is, I don't know if it's something that I've come up with or something that I've read. I'll claim credit for it until I hear otherwise. But making sure that like they're kind of roughly feeling that they're putting in the same amount of effort to what they're doing at the moment to what they were doing before, and then creating some progress outwardly from there. I found that particularly useful in my own training because I've got 2 small kettlebells, and I'm used to having like a pretty well-equipped gym. So I'm just trying to do enough reps so that it sort of feels the same as when I was doing less with heavier. Go on, Ras.
Sorry, Eddie, I didn't want to. Just on the circuits front and on the communication bit, over the last week, because I was getting a bit fed up with the stuff you were talking about earlier, just in terms of the audio and you know, you're right, I was doing exactly the same of like setting someone up with a little circuit and then letting them go requires less constant input from me and less of them stopping. What I've actually done over the last week is turn my exercise programs into presentations exactly like this one, with little timers on. So I can flick through the presentation on share screen and they can see what exercise they're doing now. So on circuits and stuff like that, on this full screen. So rather than me having to say it, it's actually on the screen as well. And it seems to be working really well for people with circuits. So yeah, just a little thing that I've tried that seems to be working.
Yeah, nice. You could just load up the spreadsheet as well and just have it on a timer and then fuck off as well. So
yeah, it's mainly so I can have a cup of tea.
No, that sounds really good though. I'd quite like to see an example of that. Yeah, I think as we get it's like an example of just like refining it as well, just having a good method and just being okay, this makes things a little bit easier for both parties. It takes away some of those issues as we learn, sort of minimizes the impact of any of those disadvantages. But yeah, that's how I found it sort of shaped programming. I don't know if anyone else has found anything sort of wildly different than that. But I think sort of acknowledging those and sort of actually accepting that this is a nicer way of making our clients work hard, rather than trying to sort of teach them something that's like, yeah, a pistol squat is probably a strength move for people that can't do them. But if you haven't coached them before, and there's probably so many barriers for them to be able to engage with a move like that, you probably are better off doing some lunges and accepting that you're probably going to have to do a few more, and maybe supersetting them with another leg move to get that, rather than trying to go after a strength-based move that's going to be a lot harder to coach. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Kerry, how are we for time? What are we, 10, quarter past?
It hasn't come up with a 10-minute warning yet.
Okay, cool.
So to keep going, you know.
Cool. So I've discussed some of these in Instagram posts, but obviously, as well as the disadvantages before, like the uniqueness of this lockdown that we're all in, it has presented us with several opportunities. The predominant one being that we've got a lot more free time. Like, I've never had this much free time in my working life, particularly given that we're not commuting. I've not got anything to do ever. So that's kind of unique for a lot of our clients as well. At the moment, there is reduced opportunity for excess in terms of going out drinking, going out to restaurants. And I know that Dan Price often talks about that being one of the biggest contributing factors to weight gain for a lot of our clients. And because of the regular sort of health news and the stuff in the media, there's a bit more of a focus on health and well-being at the moment as well. So I think that we can take advantage of a lot of these elements and try and use them to encourage some good habits in our clients. More of a way of keeping them on track with their health and fitness, keeping them engaged with our products. Because if they feel that it's all a loss, then the PT might go as well. Whereas if you can find different ways that they can succeed with their goals through taking advantage of some of the opportunities provided, we're able to just keep health and fitness as part of the conversation. So some of the things that I've been working on with a lot of clients are just increasing the amount of exercise they're doing, because they're not moving around as much and commuting and having that sort of day-to-day. So things like Faye mentioned, additional yoga or any additional activity, getting out on bikes, going for walks, adding in step count targets is all good stuff to encourage. Doing something for their mental health, like learning something, new hobby or re-engaging with an old hobby, is great for sort of the brain to be thinking about problem solving in a way that isn't work related. Additional mobility work or additional exercise. I know Monty's referred to this as movement snacking, which is not an expression that I'm particularly fond of, but it's kind of, has anyone else ever heard of it? Sort of this idea that you would just, rather than doing a training session, you would just kind of do a little bit here and there and snack on stuff as the day goes on. But with us being at home and with clients, they don't have to be on camera all the time, or they're not in their office. The opportunity for things like that, I know Russ, I think you mentioned someone doing some pull-ups on a door frame or something like that, every time they go past it, rather you can't do that in an office because you look like an idiot. So if the client is down for that, then absolutely we should be taking advantage of the fact that they're going to be moving a little bit more. People have got a lot more time to cook. which is a hobby of mine. So I've been encouraging a lot of clients to do that. And also because we're not able to go and eat in fancy restaurants, we have to sort of create our own culinary pleasures. I've seen some good stuff on Russ's page as well, which I always assume is Louise, but it probably is unfair.
If it's baking, it's 100% not me. If it's cake, it's not me. If it's dinner, it's probably a 50-50 chance.
And some of the other stuff I've worked with a few clients are just like general habits that we would try and look at in the gym, like sleep, hydration, things like meditation, if you feel it's client appropriate. And these perhaps aren't the sort of big hitters that we'd maybe go after in like normal circumstances. We kind of want people's diet to be pretty good and their training to be really solid, but in absence of some of those things, it's nice to sort of, if they've got the time, to really encourage stuff if clients want to, because there's some real opportunities that if we get our clients focusing on some of these things and still feeling like they're creating some positive reinforcement and positive habits with their training, it's something that when we do return to the gym, then hopefully if they've built and cemented some of these habits while we've had the time to work on them, that we will benefit from those for a long time going forward. If they feel the benefits of sleeping properly, being properly hydrated, having learned a few healthy recipes and felt the benefits of doing some food, like cooking food at home, they're not going to forget these things. They might get a bit off track, but at least they'll be on board or seeing the benefits and trying to use them where possible. So when I was writing this list, I don't know if anyone else has come up with any good uses of their clients' time. I'm sure my list is not complete.
I think one of the big ones for me is time outside. I think when my clients were coming back from the office and they've been out of the house all day, all they want to do is stay in the evening and relax and chill and not go out. Whereas I think that's very different now in the evening. If somebody's been stuck in the house all day, I'm finding that people are like volunteering their time to go outside and wanting to go for walks and wanting to go for bike rides. So I've been looking much more at like the maps around where my clients live and sending articles of like walks to do in central London and cycling routes, which I wasn't really familiar with before. And that's been really good. Like clients have clocked up some serious miles, walking and cycling in the evenings. I know it's been a bit rough over the last few days, but that's something that's definitely changed in my like client load. A couple of them are fortunate enough to have gone out to the country. So it's even easier for them, but yeah, that's definitely a changed trend.
Have we found that with our own training as well? I've never spent this much time outdoors.
I take the rings
worked
down
in various London basements in the last like 8 years.
Didn't you say that you think you've aged just from
just from exposure to sunlight? Yeah.
I think I've grown from all the exposure to daylight.
Vitamin D.
Yeah, like a little plant.
I can't afford to age. One of my colleagues described me as looking like my own father a few months ago. I think I might have been Dan Price actually. By a comment on two photos that were 5 years apart. Bastard. But that's there he is. There he is. He's emerged. Was it you, Dan, or have I falsely accused you?
It was, Russ, but you're quite a unique case of looking very, very young and then quite a bit older over a short time frame. It's not that either.
That's a very polite way of saying you've aged badly.
Neither were particularly a problem. Both were nice pictures. They were just quite extreme ends.
They were. You're absolutely right. I just wanted to wake you up, Dan. I didn't want you, lapsing in shadow.
Here, mate. Don't worry, I'm here.
So I'm going to use a case study or just a bit of a discussion of a client that was actually struggling a little bit before lockdown, just because he loves a big session, and it's not a training session. That's like a big drink session with his mates, like multiple times a week. And he's lost some weight in the past, but has gained a lot of it back as well. So I thought that he would really struggle with lockdown. So I tried to really get stuck into him with a lot of these habits straight away. He's only doing one session a week, and he's been continuing that virtually. He doesn't have a ton of equipment. He's got one, I think it's 20 kilo kettlebell and a resistance band. So sort of done his programming like I've mentioned. So we do some sort of deadlift combinations with the kettlebell, and then there's a lot of like press ups, which he was pretty poor at, but we've been practicing them quite a lot. And we never used to do any circuit training before. We'd just focus on like compound moves, but now it's more lighter weight compound moves in a circuit. And I think he's probably feeling a little bit fitter, might have lost some absolute strength, but to increase the activity he was doing, he's been doing press ups and some band dislocates. So just to get his shoulders working in the morning. I think he tries to do like 30 press ups in the morning. So it's not loads, but over the course of the week, it's all adds up. And one of the other things we've been doing, he wanted to get a bit more into cooking, which I'm really into. So we have a catch up just on WhatsApp and share like our favorite recipe that we made in the week. And it's usually like pretty nutritious, like a high protein dish. So he's been cooking like a lot, like he never used to cook before at all. And now like weekly, we've sort of shared between us over 12 weeks. We've got like 24 recipes of like high protein, nutritious dishes that we've been like switching and trying. And he never used to do any walking other than sort of around Covent Garden for work. But he quite likes it. So we set him like a pretty ambitious step target. And since then we've had this spreadsheet. Oh no, it's not a spreadsheet. It's a website. I don't know if I've got it on my screen, but I'm not going to try and switch away from this one. But it basically, you type in your start location and then it lists all the different cities as they get further away from you. So you can you see how far you could have walked if you were walking in a straight line from London. So he's up to like somewhere in Denmark. It's like Aarhus in Denmark was the last one we sort of checked in on. And he's gradually just walking further away. So we kind of just have a little bit of a joke about that. But this has all sort of resulted in like 8 kilos of weight loss for one session a week. But it's obviously all because of the other habits he's doing. So I know that sometimes we don't necessarily think of like the step targets and sleep and like reducing alcohol as like being big players all that much. But when you take away like a lot of the booze and some of the meals out and replace them with like pretty nutritious stuff and a little bit less booze, and then just increase that daily activity, it does have quite a big impact. And yeah, a client that was sort of not really engaging with the habit stuff, even though he loved training before, has now had a sort of drawn into sharp focus the benefit of actually engaging with some of the stuff that I was nagging him about for ages. So I'm hoping that going forward, when he comes back into the gym, we've always got that to sort of go back to if he decides that he wants to go on, have a drink or go out a bit more with his mates. He knows that the impact of that he's going to be fully aware of what that's going to mean and how he can rectify it through increasing his activity. So I thought it was a nice example of some of the things that have come out of lockdown that have sort of been able to make like obviously a reduced training environment actually cause some quite positive results with some clients. And I'm sure there's we've heard a lot of success stories from